The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.
Welcome, everybody, to the week that was. If you're wondering what happened to Craig Foley, I know that this is the Asian century, and you're wondering if he became Asianized. That's not your picture. My name is Saeed Khan, and I am really privileged to be your guest host today. So here's a reference for all of you watching on live stream, wherever you are. Echo, echo, now pinch hitting for Pedro Borbon. Manny Moda. Alan, I see that you're smiling, so you know the reference. Why don't you go ahead and make it, mate?
Manny Moda?
Yep.
No, you can go.
Where's it from? What's that?
I remember it vaguely. Go ahead.
That's from Airplane.
The
movie. There you go. That just included everybody on the show.
We're starting with an Airplane reference? Oh, Saeed.
It can only go down from here.
Picked the wrong day to stop sniffing glue, Saeed.
I knew Daryl would come through. So, well, as you can tell, Craig is not with us. And let me just go ahead and say, Craig, we all love you. Don't worry, nothing bad happened to Craig. In fact, something really happened as an upgrade. Craig is now at Van Dyke Horn, which, as some of you know, is Michigan's largest minority-owned public relations firm. This is the next step in Craig's career evolution, which only looks up. So, Craig, best of luck from all of you here at the week that was.
Nah, I'm the largest. I'm the greatest. Barnes and Company, Media and Public Relations. Forget them.
Well, if you're going to go ahead and quote, I'm the greatest, you must have been watching Ken Burns' excellent documentary, Greg, on Muhammad Ali recently. There seems to have been quite a few shows about Muhammad Ali, so hope some of you have caught that. Well, we need no introduction to our motley assortment of commentators today, but that's great. Hey, motley is great. Aren't you part of the crew there, Sandy? So
all right.
We're going to go ahead and start with you. Sandy Swoboda is program director for Detroit Public TV's Great Lakes Now. Sandy, great to see you again. We've been together on WDET a few times.
We have. I love our careers intersect in public broadcasting. Good to see you and everybody else.
Excellent. We also have from my own beloved Wayne State University, Daryl Dossey, a freelance journalist, as well as a best-selling author, including I Ain't Scared of You, Bernie Mac on How Life Is. Welcome, Daryl.
Hey, great to be here, man. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Excellent. And dressed like he's on the cricket pitch, we have Greg Bowen from Deadline Detroit, columnist and a public relations specialist. Welcome back, Greg.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay. That smooth voice. You could be a cricket commentator as well. So for those of you that are tuning in, watching us on Facebook Live and other medium, thank goodness this is not Monday, because if it was at exactly 11:39 a.m., our world stopped. It was not the Mayan 12/21 date, and it wasn't Y2K. It was where Facebook, along with, of course, its constituent companies, WhatsApp and Instagram, all collapsed for the eternality of 7.5 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you all, what were you doing when the world stopped? Sandy.
I was actually creating events for Great Lakes Now. So I opened a file, had it on a browser screen, left it open, and then came before 11:39. Came back to it after and nothing worked. Mind blown. But
which app affected you the most?
Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Alan, you were saying?
I was actually went with some people to a cabin out in the woods outside of South Haven. So I didn't even notice it, and I didn't even have any idea. I was like, at the end of the day, I'm like, what's going on here? So I mean, it's interesting because I use Facebook so often. I mean, for the website and personally, So it's obviously been an integral part of our life, but it's evolving into something, I don't know, as the evil empire that we are all still partaking, much like it's like Amazon, where we sort of hate Amazon. Jeff Bezos is sort of the evil overlord or whatever, but yet it's so easy and convenient that I still use it.
I loved how Twitter and even MySpace were trolling Facebook, saying, we'll take you in, you poor, wretched refuse, you huddled masses. We will take you as a shelter in the storm. Daryl, I mean, I'm sure that with the work that you do, social media, especially the Facebook platforms, must be king.
Well, they matter a lot. Absolutely. I mean, we put a lot of the work that we do out there, and I use it personally. But I gotta say this. I'm like Alan. I really didn't notice. I was off the grid, I guess. I mean, I wasn't out, with Alan crawling around with the Michigan militia through the weekend. but I was. They
are taking Jews now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. You and Enrique Tarrio. I didn't notice it. I think I would have assumed that I was just back in Facebook jail anyway. But I kind of got through it all without noticing. It wasn't until later when I was watching the news in the evening that I found out that the apocalypse had hit and that everybody was freaking out. But no, I was cool, man. It's good to know that I can get along in the world without Facebook.
Well, you mentioned the Michigan militia. Now you triggered me, man. I went to high school in Lapeer, and two of my alum from my high school were Jim and Terry Nichols, who were part of the Oklahoma City bombing incident back in 1995, along with Timothy McVeigh. So for those of you who are ever wondering if I was the most unique alum in the buzzing metropolis of Lapeer, think again, man. They definitely eclipsed me on that. Except I don't think they can come back and speak on commencement day. I just have a feeling that jail might preclude that.
No, well,
I go back far enough with Alan Lingle to remember him covering that at the Detroit News Days, Alan.
Yeah. Well, I used to, after the bombing, I used to go once a week over to the farm with James Nichols to talk to him. And initially the conversations would seem rather normal, and then he would go into his anti-government rants. And the last time I called him was on the 15th anniversary. I was doing a piece for AOL News, and he said to me, he didn't remember me, even though I came there every week. He goes, "I don't remember you." And then I said, well, I'd like to do a story. I'm doing a story for AOL News. And he said, "Well, if you got a checkbook, then we can talk." And I said, "Well, sorry." I said, "We don't pay for stories." But I did a story anyways on him.
Well, back in the mid-'90s, checkbooks were big with Jerry Springer as well, if I recall. Some of you remember how he used to pay for some of the services rendered as mayor of Cincinnati. So there you go. Well, Alan, if you were up in Lapeer, I mean, you must have quadrupled the Abrahamic faith diversity by being there. So
well, you know what? I have an interesting story. The first day we went up there, it was a Friday. I went up there with John Bebo and Joe DeVera, who was a photographer, and we all ended up at the Decker Tavern or the Decker Bar, whatever it was. And
get it right. They care.
Yeah. Well, it's not. I don't think it's open anymore. But we all got there, and it was so funny because reporters had converged from all over the country, and some foreign correspondents who were based in New York were there. And so suddenly, this really lily white place was suddenly integrated with Asians and blacks and Jews and everything. And I remember Joe DeVera going to the bathroom, and this redneck was sitting at the bar and said real loud, he said, "Who let that gook in the bar?" And we were like, wow, this is like, and they were freaked out. It was suddenly, I mean, here's these people who had gone to Decker to get away from the city, to get away from, what society is. And here it was, society came to them, and they were freaked out about it. So.
Yeah, my Decker story is going through there once, and they asked me, "Are you one of them Islams?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all the sect." So, Greg, what does it say about us as a society that so many people were really frozen, paralyzed with their dependency on particularly these three apps? And I mean, there's a lot right now, as Alan said, that Facebook being the evil empire, having too much control over three very critical and different apps. I mean, I'm a big WhatsApp person. So many groups to which I belong internationally, we were shut down. I'm not much of an Instagram person, I have to admit. Facebook is certainly helpful. But what did it say to us that we were so, it seems, dependent on these apps?
Well, first of all, let me say your first world problem sort of reaction to it surprises me. I must be the last of the blue collar Black experience people, because when I couldn't get on there, I was like, oh, is my internet cut off? Did I pay the phone bill? So I was like checking frantically to make sure all my stuff was paid and on, But ironically, it came before the day that the whistleblower was going to testify in Congress about the impact that Facebook algorithms have on young girls, in particular, teenagers, when it comes to Facebook and when it comes to Instagram. And so on the one hand, people were, I think this demonstrated not just how dependent we are on it, but how valuable it is across many areas of our life. Sandy talked about business. Daryl talked about just not being there for a second, but uses it in his job. And, certainly we are Facebooking live here for Deadline Detroit. And so the idea that that was put before people was for us to focus in on the detrimental effects that it may have on developing teenagers. At the same time, it was up against the backdrop of just how critical it is, not just to, poke and wave grandma or see, like your friends and what they're eating for dinner or lunch, but the everyday commerce of the world. And that, I think that point was kind of lost on people. Even when we started this out, we were talking about the sort of personal experiences that we had. But the reality is that social media is intertwined with business and with politics in ways that we hadn't really seen before. I'm always reminded of the Arab Spring and the way that Facebook was instrumental in people being able to organize against the government in another country on another continent. And and that's really important stuff.
And now we're seeing examples of how WhatsApp has been used actually to mobilize hate groups. So there's that aspect, which is the polar opposite of the organizing of the Arab Spring. Look, I mean, I, as I said before, not an Instagram person, but I realize that there's so many small businesses that rely on Instagram for their advertising. I mean, a taco truck in Madison Heights, Katrina Mia, by the way, fantastic birria tacos. Not a paid consultant or a sponsor, and also a place that makes churros. It's basically a mom and daughter place. They were shut down for 7.5 hours. I don't know how it might have affected that, but it's clear that it seems as though this is now in play in Washington, and there might be some movement on what to do with these leviathans in social media. So speaking about Washington, we had a little bit of Washington come right here to our beloved state, and that was POTUS in Howell. President Biden made a visit. I'm sure it was just by coincidence that he was in Michigan 8, Alyssa Slotkin's district, to go ahead with his Build Back Better. There's a lot of alliteration. I think Melania Trump's big thing was be best. So sticking on the B's, we got Build Back Better. And his initiative.
But at least with, grammatically correct.
And most likely it was his own, not plagiarized from Michelle Obama. But the idea that Michigan is apparently back in play, or it never was out of play, And this was on the heels of what now is, it seems, crisis averted for the moment, the debt ceiling issue. What do you make of President Biden's recent visit?
Well, I think first of all, the Democrats are worried about some of the governorships. I mean, we're going to see the race down in Virginia, and I think Whitmer should be a shoo-in, but she's done some she had some missteps, and so I think coming to Michigan is one of those things to say, hey, let's help the Democrats out here. So, that message that he gave could have been anywhere, really. I mean, he talked about union jobs, which is, plays well for the most part in Michigan here. It was sort of a rah Michigan thing, and I think it's here to help Whitmer, who was I think under serious consideration at one point for vice president before things changed. But I think they're worried about the governorships, and Whitmer is one of those things. I mean, who knows with Chief Craig? I can't really tell what kind of traction he's going to get. You can't really tell what kind of candidate he is right now. And the majority of support for Chief Craig is anti-Whitmer. It's not that people are so much embracing Chief Craig, but some people are not in favor of Whitmer. So we'll see where that goes. But I think Biden is very well aware of trying to shore up the Democrats for 2022.
Well, he's also got an issue across the region. If you look at and we know the electoral map is not necessarily an accurate depiction of votes. This is where I get to give a shameless plug for GreatLakesNow.org. But right after the election, we did an analysis of the voting. And if you look at the electoral map, he wins Illinois, he wins New York, he wins Michigan, he wins other Great Lakes states. If you really look at the popular vote across the Great Lakes states, that was Republican. And if you strip out, Chicago, and New York comes in as a state with New York City, not necessarily the Great Lakes region, but that was by no means the blue curtain that looked like it had been drawn across the Great Lakes region. So there's that part of it too. And he was here to push Build Back Better, which is all about infrastructure. Specifically, water infrastructure in the Great Lakes region is going to be huge. We've seen that this summer with the flooding across the Metro Detroit area, including the basement right below where I'm sitting, if I may say. And so, looking at the Biden agenda for climate change, for infrastructure, for making that case to cities, and also not only the governorships, but his own race, or at least his parties in a couple of years. We'll see more of them in these states.
So basically, Sandy, you get a choice. You can either shamelessly plug Great Lakes Now or your basement. I think it's a little selfish to plug two things. You might be taking away from someone else.
There is no audience for my basement. So
very, very true. There was a poll out today, Greg, I think on CNN, that said that Biden is losing the independent vote, something that he had in 2020. Something that went toward Trump in 2016. Is that dangerous, or are we just simply too far out from 2024 to be even really worrying about this as a bellwether?
Yeah, no, it's something that we definitely have to worry about because the midterm elections are coming up. And so, generally speaking, the president that's in power, the party that's in power tends to lose seats in a midterm election. And the margins are so thin now that if you lose one or two seats in the Senate, you lose one seat in the Senate, and it's, you lose control of the Congress. And so, it does matter. It's a reflection of what's going on.
Well, the other thing, Daryl, we're now that the census is in and now that the numbers are in, it looks like Michigan's going to lose a congressional seat.
Yeah.
How do you see then that impacting the politics of the state? How do you see that impacting 2022?
Well, the one thing about Michigan that I'm sort of looking forward to is how things are going to be when we have nonpartisan gerrymandering. I think that that will hopefully unleash the real potential of the electorate that I think has been largely suppressed, not just in Michigan, but all around the country as a result of some of the dirty tactics that the Republicans engage in with regard to not providing enough polling places, not keeping places open, and some of the voter suppression laws that we see sort of coming into place now. I'm hoping that Michigan can at least maybe have a chance of being a bit of an outlier. At the same time, one of the districts that we're losing is one of the two, I believe, majority districts in the area, and so that's problematic. Let me just say though also that while I do understand the president's need to get out and push this infrastructure package, I think it's very important. I agree that a lot of him coming to Howell in Michigan was about shoring up Democrats in the state, but the Democratic Party is going to have to face the facts that you talk about build back better. I say you better build blacks better. You better make sure that you're doing everything you can to ensure that Black people and other voters of color who back Joe Biden are actually getting something from this administration that looks like real progress in terms of our issues and interests. I think infrastructure, COVID-19 mandates of action. I think all of these things are important. There's no question that this is important stuff. But he does not win without a strong Black electorate. And I think that, Joe Biden has got to do a whole lot more in that regard. He's got to get in that bully pulpit. He's got to travel the country the same way he's pushing this infrastructure package and, and fight for voting rights. He's got to get out there, fight for the John Lewis Voting Act. He's got to, do everything in his power. I believe that the Democrats need to be talking very seriously about expanding the Supreme Court. I think a lot of the stuff that they're doing right now, a lot of it, unfortunately, is stuff that's going to be undone should the Republicans, take power again. And I think that, they need to be worried much more about institutionalizing and concretizing a lot of the support that they had. And I don't think that happens without them making very strong overtures to Black and brown communities, particularly, like I say, in the way of voting rights. I think that, it's great to see that there's been some pushback on the Texas anti-abortion law. I think that you've got to be able to activate suburban women. You've got to be able to activate progressive women across racial and ethnic lines. I don't think that they've done enough vocally in that regard. So while I think it's great to see him here pushing that, too much of what I'm hearing still sounds like the same old from Democrats in terms of, union jobs and all that kind of thing. We've seen unions lose a lot of power. They've lost a lot of presence. And while they're still, certainly powerful and integral here to workers here in Michigan and many other places, I think that the president and his administration has got to be a whole lot more serious about, locking in voting rights and about doing everything that they can to protect this. The Republicans have basically stolen, 2-3 seats on the Supreme Court. And there's, not a whole lot that's going to be done about, removing those folks. I mean, I've been hoping that Brett Kavanaugh would get investigated again and, that we can go back and start looking at old Coke cans and take a look at Clarence Thomas again. But, I don't see that. I don't see that, forensic analysis is always, I don't see that happening. But I do think that the president has, he's done a very poor job, I think, of energizing African-American voters. He's made, I think, a lot of Black voters feel like he's failed them. Al Sharpton talked about that, Biden saying that he's going to have our backs. And, we're getting stabbed in the back by a lot of these laws. I mean, even here in Michigan, there's been talk about, voter suppression efforts. Now, fortunately, having a Democratic governor kind of rebuff that stuff has helped us. But, we've got real insurrectionists in office here in Michigan. We've got people who are totally on board. We're totally on board with the attempted overthrow of a legitimately elected president here in the here in Michigan. And so, we've got to be very, very careful, not just about the rhetoric, but about taking concrete action to make sure that we're shoring up and activating and energizing the people who are going to, turn out. You can't just tell Black folks they've got to out-organize voter suppression. You've got to do something. And I just don't think enough has been done. So with the same, I hope he brings that same energy to promoting voting rights and advocating for voting rights and ending voter suppression that he's trying to bring to pushing this infrastructure package. Because as important as this is to his agenda, I don't think the Democrats stand a chance in 2024 if they don't really.
And I just let me say on the redistricting thing, this is really important. There's only one Black person in the Michigan delegation. That's it. And the way that these maps the preliminary maps are looking, it's looking like that Black folks are going to be at most may be at most 20-25% of any, district, congressional district. Now, I'm not saying that people just vote along the lines of race, but that's going to make it pretty difficult for, a Brenda Lawrence, for example, or for anybody, person of color, to be able to ascend to the Congress. And I don't know to what extent. I mean, I know we've got this, this group of people that are working to try and redraw the lines, and they're supposed to be paying attention to things that, the commonalities that people have, and race is certainly a part of that. But to what extent, I'm not sure, because even though it's 2021, we're still, as a society, too afraid to talk honestly about race, racism, racial reconciliation, all that stuff. And so, that's what concerns me, is that we may actually go from, there was a time when we had 2 Black folks in the Michigan delegation, and they always came from Detroit. And I was always wondering, why can't we get some outstate folks from Muskegon and Benton Harbor and Saginaw and Lansing and stuff like that? Yeah. And so we got to pay attention to that.
And I don't think you mean John James, Greg. I don't think you're referring to folks like John James.
No.
or Chief Craig.
Or James Craig, absolutely.
Yeah. Alan,
I agree with both what Greg and Daryl have said. It's interesting about the polls with Biden is that he came in as there was such great relief for a lot of us to see Trump leave. And he came in, and then the rollout for the vaccine seemed to get smoother. His big infrastructure plan seemed to be moving forward. And then you had the border, and then you had the pushback from really the conservatives. And almost feels like a sabotage of trying to sabotage the whole movement about masks and vaccines, where, here it is, Lindsey Graham tells a group of people to get the vaccine, and they're all, booing him. I mean, you've got people working so hard with the biggest goal just to win again. So it feels like suddenly Biden is swimming upstream instead of setting the agenda. He's just reacting to a crazy agenda, and that's got to change. He's got to get a hold of a lot of things, as you say, the voting rights, making sure that the Black voters who helped put him in office feel like they're getting a piece of the pie, and just getting the border in order and figuring out what to do with that stuff. There's just so much confusion right now. So I think even people who voted for Biden have some doubts about what he's doing in there. But then you remind yourself, well, at least Trump is gone, but that can't go on forever. That can't be the standard for at least he's not Trump. So,
can you know what? My basement. My basement's actually political here.
Yes.
It's all about you. It's all about you. What's happening with Sandy?
It's not just, my basement was not nearly as bad as most people's basements that experienced the flooding. And that flooding was something that went, I'm talking about the last weekend of June. There have been plenty of other incidents since then. But I think, that really put on people's radar in a way that politicians could use. Not that I'm a political advisor, but, back to the water infrastructure and the needs of the communities related to climate change, that I think that message is not obviously coming through maybe as clearly as it should be, listening to the three of you and talk. And I'm not saying there's not other important issues at stake here, but if I come at this from the, sort of the climate and the water safety perspective, which is what I do at Great Lakes now, that's really something that, everyone, a lot of people cutting across race, income, and a lot of other demographics we could come up with, a lot of people experienced that flooding, and some people for the first time. And so I think that, sort of uniting through disaster mentality, it certainly pointed out the need for infrastructure improvement. And, that's something that I think has trailed off because the crisis has sort of passed, but in community by community, it's still an issue. And so making that connection between election issues and what people experienced this last summer, and who knows what we might experience with more severe weather and disasters and emergencies, that's something I think does resonate with voters in their own lives on a daily basis. If they're not thinking of the greater issues that you guys are describing here, certainly to create that message around, hey, this is something that's impacting your life, and here's what your government is actually trying to do about it. Help us. That's maybe
Sandy,
I'll take advantage of.
Sandy, I think one of the things that you should also consider in this conversation is it's not just, that folks had their basements done. It's that well-off folks had their basements flooded. It's, upper middle class people in all these supposedly good neighborhoods poor people have always suffered, from bad infrastructure, not investing in the infrastructure and stuff like that. But now you got houses along Lakeshore Drive, and you got houses in the Points, and you got some new houses and fancy construction in Detroit where it's happening at, and now suddenly it's a big issue, and so maybe that's what it takes. Maybe that's what it always takes until rich people start feeling the pain of, of the ineptitude of not investing, then, stuff will move forward.
Well, Sandy, it'll be interesting because at the end of this month and early next month is the COP26 Summit on Climate Change in Glasgow, Scotland. Yeah. So let's see what our special envoy, John Kerry, has to say with that. By the way, no one's going to take your basement seriously unless it has its own Instagram account. So just saying.
We call it the swamp. So you're right, Saeed, though. Back to our original topic of social media, that's sort of terrifying that it would probably have more Twitter followers than I do.
Well, the great thing about it is that your basement's account controls so many people that you might not be able to yourself. So just saying. So Daryl, you mentioned Justice Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. As you probably have heard, he has tested positive for COVID-19. Not sure if Squee has as well, but at least Kavanaugh has. But the Supreme Court term began on Monday, as of course social media was down, at least Facebook was. And you mentioned also the Texas judge placing a ban on the abortion ban. This is going to be a very volatile year for the Supreme Court. Public confidence is perhaps at an all-time low. I remember reading a study or a survey just a couple of days ago saying 1/3 of this country wants the Supreme Court to either be abolished or severely amended with term limits. We're kind of at an interesting inflection point when it comes to people's understanding of constitutionalism and also cases of such high visibility like the Texas case regarding abortion access. Where do you see this going, both in Texas and perhaps more broadly on the national level?
Well, like I said, I think that's where a lot of the ultimate battles are going to be waged at the Supreme Court level. Unless the Democrats do something, I don't think that many of their initiatives will stand a chance. I think we've got an openly partisan Supreme Court. I wasn't around when Roger Taney or any of those folks were on the bench, but what I'm seeing now says to me very clearly that we've got partisan hacks. So much so that they have to actually come out now and say we're not partisan hacks. Right. We've got people who are not qualified. Clarence Thomas is not qualified to be there. Brett Kavanaugh is not qualified to be there. I don't think Judge Comey Barrett is qualified to be there. I think these folks are operatives. They're political operatives that they've been put in place. When the president of the United States, or the former president of the United States, says that I'm going out to find people who are going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and then they do everything that they can to hypocritically push through these nominations. I think it's very clear. I think the writing is on the wall. I think that I'm in that 1/3 of Americans who think that the Supreme Court should either be abolished or radically reformed. I'm for expanding the bench to as many as 19, 21, 27 judges. I don't think there's any reason why it can't look like the district courts and some of the other places, some of the other courts that we have around the country. And then we won't be worrying about whether Ruth Bader Ginsburg fell down and broke her rib, or when Justice Breyer stepped down. I think there's way too much anxiety, and I think that it allows for better outcomes from the court as well. I mean, I just don't think that it's tenable for us to be able to live in a country where the Supreme Court is going to uphold or turn a blind eye to something as egregiously violative as the Texas anti-abortion law. I think that the same thing applies to many of the efforts to try and suppress voting rights in the country. It's just rank hypocrisy at this point. Nobody appointed these people so that they could impose their religious views on the rest of the country. And I think that what the Supreme Court is reflective of, quite frankly, is an attempt by those in power in this country to hold on to power by any means necessary. I think that we're moving to a minority authoritarian government. And I think that the Supreme Court is one of the institutions that, as it's currently constructed, is helping to usher us into that era. So it's very dismaying. I agree with you that this is going to be in some ways a banner year for the court, in the sense that there are going to be a lot of cases that are going to go directly to the heart of a lot of the issues that we hold dear and the way that we live our lives around guns and all these other things. But I just don't think that we can look at a court that's constructed the way that it is. I mean, these folks wanted to make sure that they could tip this court far enough that, even folks like John Roberts wouldn't be able to, turn things the other way. I mean, you got to remember, Roberts is the guy who essentially saved the American Care Act. So, I think that, these folks are installed for a very specific reason. I think that the hood, for lack of a better term, has been ripped off. I think that these folks are talking very openly about enforcing and institutionalizing white minority power in this country for as long as it takes. The demographics are shifting. You had with Barack, I think the election of Barack Obama scared them pantsless for a lot of reasons. I mean, probably the chief of which being the majority of white people did not vote for him either time, and he won. And so, you can only do so much to suppress the electorate, but at a certain point, you want to be able to make sure that even if something gets through in the way of laws or codes, that you have a Supreme Court in place that's going to continue to enforce white minority rule in this country. And that's what we're looking at right now. It's a very, very frightening situation. I think that whatever happens in terms of legislation, the real battle is with the courts.
I think the scary thing is we saw the vote on the Texas case where they allowed Texas to carry out its crazy abortion laws, and I think it's dangerous. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett, it's a farce. Those hearings where they pretend like no, my religious beliefs don't matter, my personal beliefs don't matter. We know we see that. We see particularly Alito and Clarence Thomas almost every single time if the vote is 7-2. And they're outliers there, but they are consistently outliers who vote against what the law is. And we're seeing it where these guys are really just overriding laws here. And it's not what the Supreme Court should be.
They're radical extremists. I think we have to call it what it is. They're radical extremists.
Sandy, if you had to prognosticate,
there's something to spin, to sort of take away from that whole bigger discussion. I think it's also remembering that it doesn't start at the Supreme Court necessarily. Presidential appointments for federal judges, those are for life. So the lower courts people are being put in, or we as voters are voting for judges in our local areas, and also politicians, governors that appoint judges, and I mean that whole spiral. But those are some of the elections that are often overlooked. And, in my many years in journalism, I've been in a lot of planning meetings where we talked about how to adequately cover judicial races. And it's really difficult. People don't know who they're voting for or what that judicial candidate's background or ideology may be. I'd like to think all of them can put, like you're saying, personal beliefs aside, but all candidates start at the local level, and where those local elections take us is often what we see at even the federal level a generation down the road.
I mean, let's be honest, these people are installed because of their personal beliefs. I mean, they're letting you know quite, openly, brazenly, that they're going after these folks who have a particular disposition with regard to particular laws in order to be able to shift the weight of civil liberties in this country.
So, Greg,
it's funny.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's funny that these Supreme Court justices have such righteous indignation. How dare you suggest that I am biased? How dare you suggest that I'm ignoring the law when in fact it's just what they're doing?
Well, part of it, I mean, you see that they no longer leave a paper trail. So they're not really writing or publishing in law review journals. Many of them aren't on the bench long enough to have any meaningful decisions because they keep their powder dry. So, Greg, I mean, I think the point that Sandy is making is so critical. How do you get people energized about the down ballot? The thing sometimes on page 2 or on the back of the ballot. And now it's hard to have an excuse that you can't do your due diligence when the internet's working to go ahead and find out about some of these people running for office.
Well, I mean, there should be some kind of reform that happens here soon. Maybe there should be off-year elections or some kind of way to allow for people to pay more attention to the down ballot elections, because that'll be the only thing on the ballot. Maybe not, because then fewer people would probably end up voting. Probably the best way to do it is to have more actively and engaged clerks that talk about it, and certainly the courts. I think the courts get a pass in a lot of ways because of, pretending to be, as Daryl and Sandy and everybody has pointed out, in many ways nonpartisan, but they have an obligation. I think the judiciary has an obligation to be more forthright in connecting with the public about the decisions that they make and how important it is, if you know what I'm saying. Zoom and the pandemic provided us with an opportunity to be more engaged. Now you didn't have to physically go up into the court to watch a trial, watch a proceeding. And although the courts are now still operating with some of that Zoom thing in place, they really need to do away with the rule that you can't have cameras in the courts, and they should allow anybody that wants to be able to watch a proceeding in any court, in any state or any county or any city in the country to have the opportunity to do that. And that would include the Supreme Court. They really need to pull back some of the mystery of going to the Supreme Court and arguing before the Supreme Court, and give Alan and Sandy and Daryl and all of us the opportunity to be a part of the proceedings. And we can judge for ourselves from the interactions that are going on there as to whether or not the justices are acting impartially, as opposed to reacting to the rulings that they make based on, and we need this, the reporting that's done by reporters. And so in some kind of ways, we really need to move into the 21st century on this.
We saw in federal court, real quick, it said in federal court during the pandemic, we've been doing some Zoom, there have been some Zoom sessions there, and it's been great, but now they're pulling back. They just had a sentencing for the councilman, or a plea for Councilman Spivey, and they didn't have a Zoom there. They wanted people, you were either there or you didn't see it. And there's no reason, as Greg points out, there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to see every court proceeding. Every court proceeding is supposed to be public. And why they've decided, it's really, some of it's just an arrogance on the part of the federal judges, that they think their courtroom is so holy, and they say, oh, well, if there's cameras there, people might behave differently. Well, so what? We are entitled to see. It's our courts. It's not their courts.
Yeah, and that's standing for them when they walk in the room. I mean, come on. Sandy, did you have a point on that?
Actually, Alan made it. I was going to say the objection I've heard from federal judges specifically, is that behavior changes when a camera is there. And I don't know. I mean, we're all so used to this now. I mean, maybe that's something that'll change with pandemic. We're all used to being in Zoom meetings with cameras on and doing our jobs in front of the camera, albeit a little point on my laptop versus a, giant courtroom camera that we think of from earlier times. Maybe we'll see some of that shift, but I think, sometimes it's individual judges as well, but the decisions are made. And the one thing I can lobby for, and my media hat on, is transparency. And I will take that all day long.
Well, the response to a federal judge saying something like that is simply, when was the last time you watched the congressional proceedings on CNN. I mean, every day, Congress people get the opportunity to walk up to the mic and say whatever it is they want to say for 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever it is. Ain't nobody watching that, and they can do all the grandstanding that they want to, So I mean, there is a level of arrogance there that that does need to change, and it adds to people's desire. First of all, their mistrust of the courts, and second of all, it erodes their desire to even want to vote, down the ballot for, your town judge or circuit court judge. We got 2 judges running here in Grosse Pointe Park, and there's Darbo is the guy that's been there, and there's this other lady who's running, who's an attorney, and the feeling was, well, just let him retire with dignity. I'm like, what are you talking about? As if, you know what I'm saying? As if he deserved it. First of all, nobody knows what he does. It's a tiny little court, but it's to the point that we're talking about here is that they're so mysterious that we don't even take them seriously when we have the opportunity to. And the biggest time that we've been able to take judges seriously and find out who they were doing the corruption trials and scandals that were happening during the Kilpatrick administration and stuff like that. Suddenly, these Wayne County Circuit Court judges that you didn't even know who the heck they were now household names, and people were paying attention.
So you're talking about our down ballot and some of these races that perhaps are not as prominent. Michigan, I think, is unique among states that our 3 biggest universities, you actually can vote for the people that serve on their governing bodies. The Board of Governors, the Board of Trustees, in the case of Wayne State and Michigan State, respectively, and the Board of Regents for the University of Michigan. Now comes news that U of M President Mark Schlissel is stepping down a year earlier from his contract. He's stepping down in 2023, but the Regents are going to pay him for another 2 years. And this, of course, in the midst of the growing scandal regarding Dr. Anderson and the number of alleged victims that are being disclosed. Is this just big money? What about the idea of confidence in higher education and in some of our biggest universities that it seems like? I mean, what is he getting paid? Close to $1 million is, I think, his salary. One of the highest in the country. Anyone?
Well, I'll say this. Just it sort of speaks his case and Michigan State and Penn State. It speaks to the secrecy, the institution. It becomes so much more important than the people it serves. And we're seeing it at University of Michigan. I mean, when we try to report on stuff at the University of Michigan, they are so secretive. They send things to lawyers. They invoke this and that to tell why they can't release certain information. There's no transparency to that. And it's so important. Donations, contributions, image is so much more important. And we're seeing this right now at the University of Michigan with Dr. Anderson. We're seeing how poorly this has been handled. We've seen it with the Dr. Nassar case. We've seen it at Penn State, and really, institution itself. We've seen it with the Catholic Church, and we're still seeing it played out, I guess, even in France and everywhere. And it's just, universities have, again, these are state universities. They're our universities, and yet they are so secretive. They will not tell us so many things. So many times when we deal, particularly with the University of Michigan, they're so secretive. And this is what happens. You get the Dr. Andersons, you get the Dr. Nassars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that these places have a kind of an omerta, I mean, a code of silence, is somewhat disturbing. And yet it seems as though it's perfectly normalized. Is it just because of the fact that people would rather get a degree from these places and therefore tolerate the kind of hush-hush mentality and the ethos that they create?
Well, they spend a whole lot of time thinking about it necessarily. I mean, when you're, certainly students, I mean, they're much more concerned with just, get through class and same thing with the parents, making sure that they can afford to send their kids to school to get access to a higher education. And we see, education is becoming increasingly more difficult Higher education becoming increasingly more difficult for more Americans to access. When you do get in there, you leave oftentimes with a ton of debt. So I think there are a lot of other things that are involved with regard to going to college these days that preoccupy people a lot more than what may be going on behind the velvet curtain with regard to administrations. That being said, and I was going to say this even as we were talking a little bit about the courts, and I think the same thing is true at our state-sponsored universities. There's just got to be better media coverage as well. We've got to begin, we in the press, those of us in the media, we've got to begin to devote more resources to paying attention to things like this. I mean, it's not necessarily just about not having the resources. I look on local TV and, we're spending a whole lot of time talking about a shooting here or a robbery there, as though that really enhances the information level of the electorate. It doesn't. It may scare you, it may titillate you, but it doesn't do anything to inform you and to empower you to be able to help, be an active member of a democracy. In a democracy, you get the government that you deserve many times. And if we're not, doing more to be diligent about what's going on at a lot of those more veiled levels, we need great, much better state level reporting just in general. We certainly need better court level reporting. And I think that, that we've got a responsibility there too. I mean, I think people, we talk about what the electorate responds to. Well, if you're constantly feeding them, Kim Kardashian and, man bites dog type stories that really don't do anything to nourish them intellectually, to nourish them politically, I think you're going to get the sort of sclerotic electorate and sclerotic thinking that we have now. People are simply woefully uninformed. And Facebook just ain't going to do it.
I think one of the problems is money in terms of funding for the media. I mean, what we see. Look, we were all at the Detroit News. We saw we had a labor writer, an environmental writer, a healthcare writer. I was a full-time court reporter over at the federal courthouse. We had cop reporters. I don't think the Free Press has a full-time cop reporter. I don't know that they have a full-time court reporter anymore. We had all the courts covered. We had Oakland County Circuit Court, we had Wayne Circuit Court, we had Recorder's Court. We're not, and I don't know, it's frustrating as, being in the media, trying to cover so much stuff. And at the same time, when you talk about man bites dog, some of that stuff gets in there because it gets clicks, and clicks are readership for us. And when we, and it's sad. Because when we were in the newspapers back at Detroit News, nobody said, I wonder how many hits that story got. We wrote a story because we thought it was important. We covered stuff. We had a ton of people in the Lansing Bureau. Things have changed, and the readers are suffering. But at the same time, the readers don't want to pay for it because so much has been given away for free that now they don't like the idea of actually paying for subscribing to something.
Which is
this issue of the universities and them being down ballot candidates and stuff like that has morphed into the secrecy thing, and I completely get that. But you know what? Wayne County Community College and the community colleges, they have elected board of trustees too. We don't pay attention to them either. They're all islands unto themselves, and guess what? They're getting tens of millions of dollars to educate kids for free, young people for free. And so even though the internet has given us, as you folks have pointed out, the opportunity to get more information, we haven't dedicated ourselves to being able to cover it. And let's be honest, I'm a graduate. There aren't all of us Wayne State. Well, a bunch of us here are Wayne State grads. Daryl Dossey led the revolt. Took over the president's office. My man, I was there. But my point is that we're not giving the people what they want. We certainly want to read more about Wayne State being alumni or U of M being alumni and stuff like that. And we're just not getting the opportunity to do it. And so why should they? Why should the Board of Regents or the president of U of M or Michigan State put themselves out there even more when they're used as whipping posts by the state legislature on whatever issue? And so, I get it.
I mean, it was unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it's become that way. I mean, I remember when, newspapers were, they were a byproduct of, what people call noblesse oblige in many cases. Right? You had rich folks who understood, the Hearsts of the world, who understood the need to make sure that you inform people. And it wasn't about just turning a buck. And the more and more news simply became product. And we just worried about, what was flying off of the shelves versus what wasn't. I think, the more we began to do a disservice, not only to the immediate readers, but to, the American electorate as a whole.
Well, we also
we have an unengaged, we have an uninformed, by and large, segment of the voter population. Now we see that now with people still believing that the election was stolen, or that, and these crazy conspiracy theories and stuff like that. I mean, this is the consequence.
You got to hold the line, Alan. That's why Deadline Detroit is so critical. Places like this, the Metro Times, independent voices, got to hold the line.
Yep.
Well, remember, Daryl, I mean, Hearst also was into yellow journalism and helped facilitate a war, so have to be careful about that.
Well, I'm not trying to give Rosebud too much credit. I'm just saying. I want to make sure that.
So in the interest of, as Alan said, providing tantalizing journalism to everyone, and so I can dust off my native Yiddish, it's time for...
And now, it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Excellent. Now you can go ahead and share with the audience who you think has reached the depths of degradation, of depravity, and just doltfulness. Whoever wants to go first, please give us your Schmuck of the Week.
Well, I don't have anybody political. I'm sorry, Greg.
It doesn't.
No, do it.
I don't have anybody political, but let me just say, I'm 53 years old, and I've been watching the Detroit Lions since I was 6 years old. And what I'm seeing on the field over at Ford Field, I mean, I saw a better product when my son was playing for Birmingham Groves. I mean, I'm just going to be perfectly honest. It's time that the Fords sell the team. Get rid of the team. I'm really thinking about writing a book about, just a half century of futility as just a Lions fan. And they've been bad longer than I've been alive. So, let's remember that. I mean, I am just sick and tired. I mean, I'm a football fan. It ruins my Sundays. I know there are much more serious things that we could be talking about, voting rights and abortion rights. So I get that. But can I just say that these guys are ruining my Sunday every Sunday at this point, and I don't see a win in sight. And you get rid of folks like Jim Caldwell, and I'm still banging. I'm still riding the bandwagon for the black coach because at least he won. He got this team to the playoffs. Right. 2 out of 3 of the last years he was here. We get rid of him saying that's not good enough. We bring in Matt Patricia, who can't even sniff third place. And now, I think it's probably even worse, and I like Dan Campbell's passion. I like his, the fury and all of that, the refusal to get down. But, this is so much bigger than the coaches. This is bigger than the players. This is institutional rot at this point. It is time for these losers, these lifetime losers, to sell the team. You can still sell your F-150s on the commercials. Just, please free us from the pain of having to deal with any more Ford ownership of the Detroit Lions.
Amen.
Ooh, that's hard.
So, Alan, I need a ruling from you. Would that be the Schmuck of the Week presented by the Kvetch of the Week? Because
I think that works.
That was excellent passion, Daryl. I fully understand. Okay.
Speaking very well on behalf of the Lions.
All right. I will, as a Green Bay Packer fan, I really don't care about anything Daryl said. So, but I will keep in, Alan, I believe, brought up Dr. Nassar and the Michigan State tragedy there. I will do Schmuck of the Week around the FBI. This is actually a little bit older, but it's in the news as the Department of Justice announced they would open an investigation into what happened with the FBI and the elite level gymnasts reporting to the FBI about Dr. Nassar. If the FBI had done its job and investigated dozens of, this is documented, dozens of women and young women and girls would have been spared from him. And so I'm going to just take it to a little serious place there and put that out there.
That works. Okay.
All right.
Well, My schmuck of the week is Tony the Tiger, because Kellogg's is not great with that strike. They suck. I can't believe it, but actually, it'll be Tony the Tiger, as their spokesperson. But the guy's name is, I think his name is Hood. Chris Hood, that's his name. He's the president of North America, Kellogg North America, and he could end this strike like that if he wanted to. And, when we think about people who, well, actually, we don't think about people who make cereal, just like we don't think about people who make bacon, or steak or any of that stuff. These are not jobs that people really, really want. And what they've proposed is that, and I don't, they're not a client or anything, but, same arguments, two-tiered wage system, working people to death to give you cornflakes and all that stuff. And it's time out for that. And they've gotten to the point now where the workers go on strike. Now, who the hell wants to go on strike in the middle of a pandemic? Nobody wants to do that. Right. And I think that an institution that makes cornflakes and frosted flakes and all the Raisin Bran and all the great cereals that that we take for granted should not be involved in in a long-term strike. They need to work it out with the workers, and whatever you need to do, this two-tier wage system that you're proposing, where the Kellogg says that some people make $120,000. Some of these folks that make the cereal, what they don't tell you is that that's double the salary of $60,000 at the top end, because they're working that much overtime. You know what I'm saying? That's what happens to the legacy people. The new people that get hired in, like at the auto plants, are getting screwed, and they don't make that much. And so it's a doggone shame that they're doing that. And so mine is Chris Hood, President, Kellogg North America, and Tony the Tiger. You're not great these days, buddy. Get it together.
I want to note that we have 3 alum from the Detroit News strike: me, Greg, and Daryl. We were all on strike together.
And in the show of solidarity, I'm switching to General Mills and Post. It's Honey Nut Cheerios from here on out.
Right on.
That's right.
Well, I think for 120,000, I think, don't you have to actually sugar glaze each flake? So Alan, I don't know how you're going to be able to top that encyclopedic knowledge of Kellogg cereals, because every one of those brands was Kellogg. He nailed it.
I can't surpass that. But I'll say real quick 2, Schmuck. One is more the dark money funds that are being used in these campaigns right now, in the city council races, in the mayoral races. I think it's so disgraceful. We don't know who's contributing to these funds, and they are putting out flyers for different candidates and billboards. It's really scary. It's really subverts the whole transparency and democracy there. But my other schmuck of the week is Jeffrey Clark, who we see from the report that came out was going to help, was willing to replace the attorney general and then push President Trump's false narrative. And it is a guy like that. I don't know if there's any way. There's probably no way to charge him criminally, but he should be charged criminally for what his cooperation in that whole mess was. So.
Well, to follow Daryl's invocation of football, my schmuck of the week, and I say this with a certain level of schadenfreude coming from Michigan, is Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, who was at one time the head coach of the University of Florida, then became the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and now currently, at least for the moment, is the head coach of the NFL's Jacksonville Jaguars, a team as hapless as the Detroit Lions at 0-4. So distraught was Mr. Meyer after his team's latest defeat that he refused to fly back on the team plane with the rest of his players, choosing instead to stay in Columbus, Ohio, and visit family at a restaurant/drinking establishment that bears his name. While there and sitting on a bar stool, taking perfunctory pictures with people who wanted to pose for selfies, a young woman who seemed to be a co-ed was in close proximity to his sitting on the bar stool, open-legged with, I suppose, his business in slight proximity as well. He also seemed to have his hands in a rather a strange position that seemed to leave very little daylight between where she ended and he began. And this has caused, of course, quite a bit of consternation. ESPN seemed to be most mortified by the fact is you didn't fly back with your team, but he then had to go through the entire act of contrition, particularly with the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, the very bicycle mustached Shad Khan, who accepted his apology but was very disappointed with him. And yet again, we see a coach in the wrong place, in the wrong time, in the wrong compromising position. So yes, Urban Meyer, this one's for you.
Wow.
Yeah. Which brings us then to the end of our episode for today. Thank you all for joining us as you have online. Thank you to Sandy Swoboda at Great Lakes Now, as well as her basement. I will give it props as the sixth Beatle. Daryl Dossey, great to see you and hear from you again. And as always, Greg Bones. And Alan, thank you for having Deadline. And as always,
drive home safely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.